Hello, friends. I'm back today with some more Tenacious V's podcast for you. Each episode, I grab some friends and some drinks, and we discuss the incredible tales of women through the centuries. We will discuss fiction, nonfiction, myth, fact, history. It's all fair game, and all we're here to do is tell the truth. This week, we're going to be discussing the amazing Annie Oakley and her wonderful philanthropic side that was a lot less known to all of us. She was a household name for Johnny, so this one was exciting for him, and he had a good amount of input, which was really fun. And then me and Will were actually a little bit behind on the curve. We hadn't grown up knowing about her and hearing stories, so this was a learning experience and a very fun one. I can't wait for you to find out all about her. Howdy, folks, and welcome back to another episode of Tenacious V's podcast.
Annie Oakley. Yeah, Annie Oakley.
What do you guys know?
The name?
The name.
Greatest female gunslinger in the West. And it's facts.
She rode with Buffalo Bill, or worked with Buffalo Bill.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a piece of shit because he helped clear out native territory, didn't he?
Oh yeah, man. He was actually proud of his slaughtering of the native people.
Now, did Annie Oakley actually
Piece of
help with
shit.
that? No, she wasn't a part of that.
She was not involved
Okay.
in
Buffalo
killing
Bill can rot
natives.
in hell.
Her,
I'll sit there and we'll listen.
her and Sitting Bull were friends. He was like a big leader of the Lakota Nation, but he also worked with Buffalo Bill.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Big reason why we teach Lakota here in Colorado
it's a big deal.
is because of trying to make up for these sins.
Wow.
Buffalo Bill his grave sits here in Colorado for you that don't know.
It's
the
about
top Lookout Mountain
45 minutes away from where we are right now.
from Denver, and yeah, he sits up there. We teach
All right,
Lakota
all
here
right.
as a language because of that too, to try to make up for the sins caused here. So, which is important, I would say.
I think that's a big deal that we do continue to teach Lakota, and that's becoming more and more common in Colorado.
Excellent.
Most of our public schools offer it as a language. The high school I went to
That is
Mhm.
years ago,
awesome.
Yeah,
it's
it's
taught
it's
as
pretty
a
awesome.
language at the high school I went to.
Very fucking cool. Hell yeah.
So
Yeah, and that's just like a regular old public school. So
yeah,
That's really cool because, growing up, it was either French or Spanish.
yeah,
Those were your options. So I think that's awesome.
it's grown a lot. Yeah, we try to get back to that, and that's there's still a lot of Lakota nation here. There's a lot of people that still speak the language fluently and still
Mhm.
have gatherings here, and people that come from it. It's still
They should try and find a way to mix that in with history classes and kind of cross over on those. But anyway,
we actually learn
Progress.
quite a bit about Native history here. Like I think they do a better job than most states
we get
here.
a decent amount, but I would
Like,
say that
we could
don't
do
get
a
lot
lot
about
better.
Lakota,
Yeah.
but yes, it's progress comes in steps that
Yeah.
way.
Okay. So back to Annie Oakley.
oh yeah, that's what we're doing.
Okay, yeah, that's what we're doing.
She was born Phoebe Ann Mosey on August 13th of 1860 in a log cabin about 2 miles outside what is now Willowdale, Ohio, which is right along the border of Indiana. Her nicknames included Miss Annie Oakley, Little Sure Shot, Lil Miss Sure Shot, Watanya Cecilia, Phoebe Ann Oakley, Mrs. Annie Oakley, Mrs. Annie Butler, and her death certificate said her name was Annie Oakley Butler. She got all sorts of names.
Miss Annie Oakley.
I like Lil Miss Sure Shot.
I don't know this sure shot a lot.
Fuck
That's a good
yeah.
one. So, 121 years after she was born, the Annie Oakley Committee mounted a plaque on stone near her birthplace in 1981, which is pretty cool. She's been recognized so many times. Her parents were Quakers from Pennsylvania named Susan Wise and Jacob Mosey, who married in 1848 when Susan was 18 and Jacob was 49. They bought a rent-to-own farm where their 9 children were born, only 7 of which survived, Annie being the 5th born of the survivors. The children went Mary Jane, Lydia, Elizabeth, Sarah Ellen, Annie, John, and then Huldah. And then only 4 of those 7 lived past the age of 30.
Looking at you,
Second
Johnny.
dying.
No, John actually is one of the ones that lived. So her father became invalid after getting hypothermia during a blizzard when he had to run to town, and he like got into a horse cart accident and like got injured and hypothermia
This guy got a carriage accident and caught hypothermia.
in a blizzard.
4 carriage
Horrible.
pilot.
It's terrible.
It was horrible. It's horrendous.
Yeah. So that was 1865, and then in 1866 he died of pneumonia at age 66. So Annie Oakley is like 6 years old at this point.
That actually
Good
kind of
lifespan.
isn't that kind of like a pretty decent lifespan? Still
No,
pretty good
66 is
lifespan.
pretty
Yeah.
solid.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's not bad. Her mom just married a real old dude. So her mom remarried Daniel Brumbaugh, and they had one more child named Emily before she was widowed again.
How'd the other daddy die?
I honestly don't
Oh,
know.
okay. Hypothermia.
Probably
Hypothermia.
something. Who knows?
Trying to play the Oregon Trail.
Dysentery.
So as a young child, Annie couldn't really regularly attend school due to severe poverty from her father and stepfather dying and leaving her mom with 7 kids, you know. So she did end up going back though later in her childhood, and then like into adulthood she got educated. So
Okay. But how was the family making money at this time? Do you have any idea, like, what their business was? Like, there's a lot to take care of.
well, and they
That's
were
a
all
mouse
ages.
feed.
Like they ranged from 15 to 2 at this point,
Okay.
and so
Oh,
Annie's
so people
6.
are working, like, at
So,
fucking
yeah.
7 and 6 and 7,
Yeah, all of
that
them are
money.
like working and doing stuff.
Okay.
So I know like some of the older sisters would like sew things and like
Okay.
clean for people and nanny and
Sure.
stuff like that. And
7 kids is a lot to take care of.
the mom
A
did
lot of
something
pounds,
like
bro.
kind of interesting, but I can't remember.
We'll have to talk about that next year.
So at age 9, in March of 1870, Annie and her sister Sarah Ellen were sent to the Dark County Infirmary, and they were cared for by the superintendent, Samuel Crawford Eddington, and his wife Nancy, who taught Annie and to sew and decorate. So like she now had some more skills that she added to her repertoire.
Very, I put that there too. Very like woman-like skills at the time too. Known as not like the masculine skills at the time of like trapping, hunting, or even just trading. Just decorating,
Patchwork,
sewing,
cleaning.
patchwork.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
Very in line with the fucking society.
absolutely.
So
I would like to throw out there though that before this point, the way that like up until she's 9, so probably from about 5 or 6 to age 9, the way she was helping support her family was actually trapping animals.
trapping.
Sick.
Trapping and
Okay,
hunting.
yeah.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah, alright. So
Very,
that
like,
like, gives you
that
a little
was-
idea.
That's
like,
actually a big point I think to make too.
It is a
Yes.
big point. Yeah, like I was getting there, but yeah. So she
little
was
gunslingers like already getting tough at a young age.
Yeah,
you
her
know?
dad was, like,
Out
teaching
there crushing
her-
the wood, fucking trapping, killing, and hunting. That's dope. Hell yeah.
yeah, her dad was like definitely teaching her the trapping at like early ages, like 4, 5, 6, you know. And then she actually took her first shot with a gun at age 8, like
That's
just
the
of
perfect
her
time.
own accord.
That's the perfect time.
Yeah.
If anybody needs to learn to shoot, right around 7 or 8.
I agree.
So later that spring, she was bound out to a family as a nanny, and they like got permission from her mom to do this. Basically, like her mom signed a letter saying like it's okay for my child to come nanny for you and stuff, like on the stipulation that you're gonna pay her 50 cents a week and get her an education. And so 50 cents a week
More
at this
valuable.
time,
Deal.
yeah, that was about $10 a week
But the
in
fun is
modern
the
money.
education.
Exactly. So they didn't come through with either. No, it was about $10.
About $10.
Yeah.
Today?
2019.
Garbage.
Most babysitters at this time, nannies at this time, definitely make a better wage than $10.
Oh,
fucking
no,
dollars a
abs-
goddamn week.
Charge about
Wait,
$15
definitely,
an hour.
definitely. But,
I charge
And if you're
$15
making
an hour.
less, fucking don't be doing that shit.
Don't.
Hustle up, man.
Yeah.
Unless you're underage and you don't need to be doing it, $15 an hour. Know what you're worth. Come on now. It's brutal.
yeah. So the couple wanted someone who could pump water, cook, and was like a little bit bigger and older, even though they chose her. They like decided they didn't like her, I guess. But they kept Annie as pretty much their slave for 2 years. Yeah, including throwing her out in the freezing cold barefoot because she fell asleep darning, which means fixing socks.
Really? You fell asleep working
No, this
for this slave
line-
shit? And they really think it's going to go their way? This young
line-
badass right here?
an
They think that's gonna go their way?
adventure almost?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, and so her mom actually like wrote to them, and she wanted Annie to go home, and they were like, no, she's so happy here, and she's doing so well, and she's in school, and you don't want to pull her out of school
But
because you
meanwhile,
can't
they're
afford
like
it.
fucking-
I'm going to tell you this right now, man. Anyone tells you that about your kid, you know, they're fucking lying. You hear it from the kid's mouth, that's it.
Yeah.
Anyone says some shit. My mama taught me that a long time ago. You talk to your fucking kids.
Well, it's all by
You don't
letter.
hear that? Doesn't matter. Doesn't sound like my kid's handwriting coming down there.
That is actually good advice. Is that listen to the kids?
No,
Always
absolutely.
Always
Don't
listen
listen
to
to
the kids.
adults
They're
in
honest and
charge of your kids.
real. Yeah, exactly.
Fuck that, because this is what happens. You get abused and you get thrown out. You won't stand for it.
Solid.
Yeah. So bad times, real bad times. 2 years. So this is the weird part, though. Annie never revealed their real names. Like, she never told anyone who this couple was. Like, she wrote an autobiography as well, like, throughout her life, and never in there does she reveal who these people were or
That has nothing
anything.
to do with trauma.
I don't know, she just called them the Wolves. That's all she would
That
ever
sounds like
refer to
trauma
them
to me.
as. Absolutely. Although Annie ran away from them in 1872, and she went back to the Eddingtons at the infirmary because her mom was away when she like got there. Like, she was going to go back to her mom, but she was like off visiting family or something.
It's a real bummer because her mom was actually didn't seem to love her kids from what we heard so far.
Yeah.
Annie back, so
She didn't have any money for the train or anything, and so there was a kind gentleman that like paid for her ticket onto the train. And it's weird because a lot of people think that that's where she got the name Oakley from, but she has also like specifically mentioned regretting not ever getting his name. So it's like a weird paradox there. Around the age of 15, she does end up going back to her mom's house, and her mother had a third husband at this point who was Joseph Shaw.
how did you die? Hypothermia.
Probably.
They got wicked rich and then just dropped dead. It didn't make any sense.
So at this point, Annie was a fantastic hunter. She'd been trapping and shooting since her father was alive, and now she was fully supporting her family by selling game to local shopkeepers
Fuck yeah.
who shipped it
Good
out
soldier.
to hotels and restaurants in Cincinnati and a few other cities in Ohio.
Good soldier, good soldier.
Yeah. So she actually managed to fully pay off the mortgage on the family farm the same year that she moved back home at 15 years old with trapping and hunting.
It sounds like she's making bank now.
Yeah, she's
Hell
doing
yeah,
pretty well, for
compared to
sure.
fucking $10 a week and a fucking
Babysitting
Oh,
and
yeah.
getting beaten.
Yeah.
She's like, and she's selling it like all across Ohio as well, so it's a pretty big like market that she's got, and she's doing well. She's doing real good, yeah.
Fucking A. Full send.
Full send.
Full set.
So she quickly became very well known. So when the Bowman and Butler shooting act came to Cincinnati on Thanksgiving Day, and Frank E. Butler, who was a traveling show marksman and dog trainer, placed a $100 bet that he could beat anyone around at a shootout, the hotel owner Jack Frost put up his own $100 against him, which is about $2,328 in 2019.
Cool, man, I got it.
That Annie got it? That Annie would beat him?
Yeah, he bet
his
on
money
Annie.
her.
Yeah. And
I
he
would
set
too.
it up personally for Annie and Frank to do the shootout.
Oh yeah, I got it.
Take him, Annie.
So Frank said that the last person he expected was a 5', 15-year-old named Annie, when they could have set him up against literally anyone in Ohio.
That says a lot about
Yeah,
this woman.
they do could. they set you up against the best.
Yeah.
All right, get ready, punk.
So it was a shootout of who could kill 25 birds within like a certain area range, and she killed all 25. She nailed it.
Yeah.
It is said that
Anybody
he
ever
either
played duck hunt?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or
um
went hunting.
so that too.
That too.
So it said though that he either missed his 25th shot or he did kill the bird, but it landed outside of their perimeter. So either way, he lost, and she won the bet.
She won
It's-
the
Yeah,
bet.
It's more likely that he missed his last shot.
okay.
That's like the more common story,
cool,
but like there's another like.
I'll take it that it went outside. Give her the fucking real edge win because she
There you go.
deserves it.
I mean,
let's
fucking
build this Western drama. Come on now.
I like it.
You know what? We've done a lot of things around the world. Now we finally have something on our territory, and I'm just so stoked to hear about our hero.
See, I knew you'd love this one. So, he was smitten with this tiny little badass and started courting her immediately.
Creepy.
So, she loved his poodle George, so he would send her cute like messages and letters that were signed by George, his poodle, which I think is pretty adorable. They were married their entire life, and she was extremely proud of their 50-year marriage and super happy with him and loved him very, very much. And they had a great marriage. So, the couple got married in August of 1876 when he was somewhere between 24 and 29, so he might have been a 30-year-old man. But Annie was 16. They never had any kids throughout their lifetime, although Annie did love children. It is possible, due to poorly kept records and like certain events not lining up, that the shooting match took place in 1881 rather than 1875, which would make her 21.
Cool.
But regardless, they had a shootout and Annie won, and then they got married a year later. Which is like also under contention because it could have been in Windsor, Ontario, or in Cincinnati, or they might have had two weddings because there's like eyewitnesses from the first wedding that happened in 76 in Cincinnati. But then there's a marriage license from Windsor, Ontario in Canada from 1881. So, or from 1882, I mean.
Maybe they just actually did them in that order. Like, for example, if they had the wedding first and then like got it like official like through the government.
Well, so people think it was because they had their first wedding, but Frank didn't realize that he was still legally married to his first wife, who had actually like she had died. But their marriage was still like technically legal, so they waited and then like got married again later, just like had the papers signed later essentially.
Okay.
But yeah, like weird record keeping stuff. So throughout Annie's career as a showwoman, she often lied about her age, saying she was like 5+ years younger than she actually was.
Weird.
Yeah. But it was like to seem more impressive. And then the later wedding like also supports her younger age. So like that could have been another factor, like getting the license to be like, oh, she was younger.
No, I see that though for the showmanship, like can be like you said, like it increases the impressiveness of the performance.
Well, yeah, because how impressed were you when you're like, holy shit, a 15-year-old beat this guy?
Yeah, when I did that a lot with like sports and stuff.
I
Like,
see all the time
things
a
like
rookie
that.
coming into the game and making a show, you know, like
Definitely.
well, one of the Man U rookies just showed up, started making a.
Yeah, Brian or Brandon Williams. He's a right back defender.
He's been making
He's 19 years old. He's doing good. Yeah, he might be left back, but he's killing it.
making a spectacle. I mean,
Yeah,
the NHL works in the NBA the same way. You see.
Yeah, so she'll say she's younger than she is, and people are like, wow.
Yeah.
It's like, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, if you show up, all right, so the NHL would be a good one for me now. You at 21, being like a starter, you get
amazing.
forward, but you say you're 19 even.
There you go.
3-year difference.
There you go.
Killer.
Killer.
You're a killer. You're dominating.
Yeah.
Like, what rookies are, you're showing the league. So I can see the same thing, you know.
Yeah. Well, and she's this like tiny little bitty chick, so it like worked for her.
That was part of her some of her titles. Was that she was small.
So the couple lived in Cincinnati for a while in the Oakley neighborhood, and that's like most likely where she got her name from.
That makes
So her and Frank started performing shows together actually because his counterpart got sick and he needed her to fill in, and then she just did so much better. And then the two joined the Buffalo Bill performance. It was actually called Buffalo Bill's Wild West,
Sure it was.
which they joined in 1885, which was a circus-like touring attraction, and they toured North America and Europe even.
Oh wow.
Her nickname, Watanya Cecilia, was given to her by her co-performer Sitting Bull, who is like the powerful and steadfast Lakota leader.
Yeah.
Yeah. Publicly, she was called Sure Shot. So that's like what they used in advertisements and posters and stuff. Yeah.
Really awesome title.
So cool.
Yeah, it's fucking sick.
A professional rivalry ended up flaring its head in Annie's very first show with the Buffalo Bill performance, because there was another young sharpshooter named Lillian Smith who joined like just a little bit after Annie and Frank, and she was only 15 at the time while Annie was 26.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of like a thing, you know what I mean?
New up and comer.
Yeah, and she was also a sharpshooter and like pretty good as well. Like definitely not as good as Annie, but like a good one. So that also could have been why she tried to do her age, like say her age was younger than it was later on, because this girl started getting like just as much publicity and press as Annie did at a certain point.
Sure. Yeah, Lisa Simpson in one episode experience with that called Lisa's Rival.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
young girl skips a grade and she's 1 year younger than Lisa.
She went to like private
Alto
schools.
instead of tenor or something, yeah. Yeah, just new up and comers, younger, like almost threat to your, confidence, positions.
Totally.
All of that, yeah. So I
Totally.
would see where that rivalry would come up.
Yeah. So she actually ended up leaving Buffalo Bill's Wild West for 2 years, but then she came back just as Lillian was leaving. So she went on the Paris Exposition of 1889, which was a 3-year-long tour, and it made it very clear that Annie was America's first big female star. She earned more than anyone but Buffalo Bill himself, and she also had a few solo shows going on the side for extra money.
There you go. Moonlighting.
Yeah. Well, and that just shows how big she was that she was able to get solo shows on the side in Europe.
There you go.
Which is crazy. So while touring Europe, Annie performed for Queen Victoria, King Umberto I of Italy, President Marie-Françoise Sadi Carnot of France, and at his request, she shot the ash off Kaiser Wilhelm II's cigarette.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's a fucking shot.
That's a shot.
That's a marksman.
Yeah. There's other big figures that she met as well, but those were like the really notable ones. From 1892 to 1904, Annie and Frank made a home for themselves in Nutley, New Jersey, which I think is hilarious. And at this point, Annie became a huge proponent of women joining the military service. And she wrote to the president, Wilhelm McKinley, in April of 1898 and offered him 50 lady sharpshooters with their own weapons and ammo to accompany the army should they go to war with Spain. And although the war did happen, her offer was rejected.
Fucker.
Yeah.
What a dumb move.
So at this point, good old Teddy Roosevelt is president, and he named his volunteer cavalry the Rough Riders after Buffalo Bill's Wild West and Congress of Rough Riders of the World, which is what the name became with Annie as the star.
Fucking right.
He rode during the fucking Spanish American War. He took them, the Rough Riders, ran through that, big part of that.
That's exactly what I just said.
Oh.
And he named it that to spite Annie Oakley for offering him women.
Whoops.
Never mind. Look at that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like,
Mansplaining gets
Damn it,
spited.
Teddy's fucking up.
No, that's it. Now he fucking, yeah, he did, but man, they were fucking good.
They're good.
They're like SEAL Team 6 at the time, bro.
I'm
They
not
were
saying they're
nasty.
not. I'm just saying the name was a move to be like,
I did
hey,
not know that.
here's your offer. Shove it up your ass, bitch. Like, we don't need your sharpshooting women. We're good enough on our own. Like,
They
It
were the
sucked,
SEAL
'cause
Team
They missed
6.
out. They missed out though. 'Cause
They did
boy,
miss out.
You know, strength in
Freaking
numbers.
nice.
I mean, imagine having a bunch of sharpshooting.
Of course. So this is
and providing their own weapons and ammo.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't have to give them shit. They were ready to just go into battle with you.
and so this is all like right after our last episode too. It all comes right.
It
after
is. It
the
kind of does
fucking
tie into all the Hawaiian
yeah,
stuff.
It
It's
comes right after because this is why we end up. This is why we annexed them.
hmm
We needed that port for this war.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It all comes together.
Crazy. You're right. Oh,
So in 1901,
good point.
which is the year that McKinley was assassinated, Annie was seriously injured and temporarily paralyzed in a train accident. She did end up recovering with the help of 5 spinal surgeries.
Oh, wow. They had spinal surgery then.
Apparently.
Apparently.
5 of them.
I mean, it took 5.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this was Susan the Flesh Picotte was like not too long after this. Like, she was born around this time.
So I
So
wonder if she actually might have studied these cases. Or some of the doctor's books.
probably, yeah. Like, I bet a lot of the surgeries that she had were like groundbreaking at the time because
If you got the money.
probably a new field.
And if you got the money.
Yeah, definitely. Like, how often do people with that much money get injured like that?
It's true too.
So she officially left Buffalo Bill's Wild West in 1902 to start a less physically demanding career as an actress in a play written specifically for her. It was called The Western Girl, and it was about a lady sharpshooter named Nancy Berry who used a pistol, a rifle, and a rope to outsmart a group of outlaws.
I like that.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
I'd see that play.
I'd see that play too.
I would too.
Sounds dope.
Phenomenal.
That sounds good.
So Annie was always really self-sufficient and believed strongly that women were just as smart and capable as men. She said, "I would like to see every woman know how to handle guns as naturally as they know how to handle babies."
Me too.
Me too.
Hell yeah.
America.
So during her career, she taught more than 15,000 women how to shoot.
There it is.
Fuck yes. This is
Right.
the way.
This is the way.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool. Like, that's a massive amount of people to educate on anything.
On anything, but yes, especially in defense that is necessary in a culture that relies on knowing that.
At that time, especially. Big deal.
Firing a gun is a big deal.
So, to your point of Buffalo Bill being a dick,
Oh, he's a piece of shit.
he was friends with Thomas Edison.
Yeah, who's
He's
also a piece of shit.
Exactly.
Fuck that dude.
Fuck that dude.
Oh man, I didn't even think we'd go in. Fuck that dude. Alright, come on. American fraud. Biggest American fraud.
So, since they were friends, Edison made the largest electrical power plant to date for the Wild West show.
Yeah, I'm sure he made that. Yeah.
He also made a film for the kinetoscope, which is like one of those, like, you know, you put the wheel of pictures in and you like look through it like binoculars and you click in a
The old
new
90s
image.
toy.
Yeah. So it's like that where you like look through into this box, like through a pinhole, and then you like see the movie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
Okay. So he made a movie featuring Frank and Annie for the kinetoscope, which is like kind of cool.
You've seen these in museums.
Definitely.
Yeah.
If you do. Yeah, I'm sure. But most people, I'm sure if you've been to like a museum of natural history or things like that.
Oh,
too.
yeah.
Maybe not natural history, but a museum of history at the time. You've probably seen these where you can go in and you can see the way the movies work. It is just like the '90s toy.
Mm-hmm.
Just sit your head into it like you would like a
Some of the
landmark.
technology from photographs were taken at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it
Just
looks a
going
lot
through
like an old
negatives.
camera.
See it all brown shaded.
So the movie was called The Little Sure Shot of the Wild West, an expedition of rifle shooting at glass balls, etc. Which is a hilarious name for a movie.
Little
Like,
sure shot. Shoot glass balls.
It's not funny to
And
laugh
your
about
balls.
glass balls, guys.
So this was the 11th film made since commercial showings began on April 14th of 1894. And this was made in November of 1894. So
Oh,
they
wow.
made 11 movies in like just a few months, which is crazy.
That's wild.
Yeah. So, Annie's first ever shot was when she was 8 years old at a squirrel that stopped on her fence to get a nut. She wrote about it later and said it was a wonderful shot, going right through the head from side to side. So that pretty much like set the stage for her to be a badass.
Hell yeah.
Like this little girl literally sees a squirrel stop and goes, "I'm getting the rifle."
Picks
And
it
she just
up.
grabbed it, and that was her first shot ever, straight through the head.
Quick shot.
Yeah. So, her performances included her splitting playing cards from 30 paces away, shooting cigarettes out of Frank's mouth, hitting dimes thrown in the air, and filling playing cards with holes between them being thrown in the air and them hitting the ground.
Hell yeah.
She'd also knock corks out of bottles and snuff the flame out of a candle with a single shot.
Fucking A.
And then many other dude perfect worthy shots. So Sitting Bull recalled her playfully skipping onto the stage with her rifle and then suddenly aiming and just taking the perfect shot every time.
I love that. That's what an entrance.
Yeah. Just do-do-do-do-do, bam.
Little sure shot.
Little sure shot. So in 1904, wild stories relating to the cocaine prohibition were selling real well. So when a burlesque dancer was arrested in Chicago and gave her name as Annie Oakley, a newspaper writer, William Randolph Hearst, put out a false story that Annie had been arrested for stealing to support her coke habit.
Wow.
Good for her.
This was
I mean, don't do that.
very untrue. So many papers also printed this story going off of her story, but they immediately retracted the article and apologized. Hearst did not want to pay the $20,000 court fees, which would have been about $570,000 in 2019. So he sent a private investigator to look into Annie, and they found literally nothing that they could report on at all.
Hell yeah.
Hell yes.
Pure as the virgin snow.
Woo.
So, over the next 6 years, Annie spent a lot of time winning 54 out of 55 libel lawsuits, which is like basically defamation or slander, against all the newspapers. And she was awarded less money than she spent on court fees. So,
Wow.
there you go.
It's a win.
I mean, she still got...
That's a legal win, though.
That's
hard
is,
to get,
yeah.
especially from someone coming from that point. A legal win is rough.
54 out of 55 is like really good too. So 2 years after the court situations ended in 1912, her and Frank built a big brick ranch house in Cambridge, Maryland, now known as the Annie Oakley House. It was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1996. So this whole time they're like pretty secluded, out of the public eye, kind of just like chilling, being husband and wife, hanging out at home. Big old brick ranch house style.
Uh-huh.
And then, honestly, I think she just got fucking bored. And so she went to return to competitions, and they moved to North Carolina in 1917. She had wanted to star in a full-length silent film, but that didn't end up happening. And I don't really know why it didn't end up happening, but it didn't. And, in shooting competitions, she continued to set new records well into her 60s.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. She also continued to be an extremely generous philanthropist and advocate for women's rights her entire life. She did all she could to support the young women in her personal community, like raising them up, like speeches, whatnot, like
Little
literally.
sharpshooters.
Yeah, little sharpshooters. I'm sure she taught every little girl in her town how to fucking shoot in every town she lived in. In 1922, when she was 62 years old, she hit 100 clay targets in a row from 16 yards away, winning a contest in Pinehurst, North Carolina.
Very good.
Pretty fucking impressive.
It is.
Later that year, her and Frank were in a car accident that left her with a steel brace on her right leg.
What about Frank?
I don't know, he lived through it. She took over a year to recover, but then in 1924, she went back to setting records at 64 years old.
Still shooting.
Still out there sharpshooting it.
Natural.
Yeah. Although in 1925 her health began to decline and she died of pernicious anemia.
Sickle
no.
Yeah. So that's a disease where you don't produce enough red blood cells because of a B12 deficiency.
Wow.
And then on November 3rd, 1926, in Greenville, Ohio, that is the date of her death. So Frank was so distraught that he stopped eating and died 18 days later.
Oh, alright, that's sad. I even hate this guy.
He loved her very much. So his body was buried next to her ashes in some tellings, although in some tellings they say that they put her ashes into one of her trophies and then put that into his coffin and buried them all together.
Wow.
Yeah. They were both buried in the local cemetery on Thanksgiving Day of November 25th, 1926.
Wow.
Which is fitting because they met on Thanksgiving Day.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. So, like, full circle. After she died, her autobiography was given to a stage comedian named Fred Stone. I don't know why, I don't know how he relates. And then it was discovered that all of the money that she made in her life was spent on her family and various charities.
Good shit, Annie Oakley. That's it. But that's what makes you an American hero.
Hell yeah.
It's not the greed. It's looking out for everyone. That's truly what America was.
It's how it should be.
Was. Should be.
Yeah.
Is not.
Is not. You can see many personal items, guns, trophies, and memorabilia from performances at the Garst Museum and the National Annie Oakley Center in Greenville, Ohio. She has been inducted in the Trap Shooting Hall of Fame, the National Cowgirl Museum and Hall of Fame in Fort Worth, Texas, the National Women's Hall of Fame, the Ohio Women's Hall of Fame, and the New Jersey Hall of Fame. So that's quite a list. So while she was alive, theaters started calling complimentary tickets Annie Oakleys because they had holes punched in them and they looked like the cards that she'd shoot through.
Fuck it, that's
Fuck
Yeah. There are several shows, movies, and plays based on Annie or including Annie. She was even played by Reba McEntire.
Fuck yes, it's my
It-
girl.
I know. In the 1996 film Buffalo Girls, which is perfect because Reba is also very tiny and also had a large mullet. So there's an Annie Oakley Foundation, which is maintained by her living relatives, which is intended to support the Annie Oakley Center and Garst Museum and dispel rumors about this legendary woman. They say if she seemed extremely protective of her public image, it is because she was conscious of being a trailblazer for women and girls. She knew she was a role model. I think it's cool that they keep her legacy alive so that she can stay a role model, but I really do think Annie would be disappointed that they aren't doing anything for the community. Like, they have this whole center set up and this whole, like, foundation, but they are really only there for Annie Oakley. Like, they're not, I don't see them doing their part for the community, which was Annie's thing through her entire life. Like, if you really want to uphold her legacy, philanthropy.
Yeah,
That's what she did. Yeah.
a lot of them were on that bit too.
A lot of who?
A lot of gunslingers from the time, but
Oh,
that's,
okay.
that's a different story.
She wrote that many people asked why she was not more selfish with her money, and she would respond, "If I spend $1 foolishly, I see tear-stained faces for the little children beaten as I was."
Oh yes, Annie.
So though she never had any kids, Annie loved them and was a beloved aunt and great-aunt to many nieces and nephews and great-nieces and nephews. I mean, she had 6 siblings, so...
Yeah.
Have some kids around.
Yeah. She left special things in her will to all of her living siblings and all of her nieces and nephews and many great nieces and nephews. And during her world travels, she would send all of them gifts and trinkets and candies and things.
Very sweet. Awesome. Oh yeah, good heart. That's really good.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You can actually look on YouTube. There's quite a few videos of her extended family modern day, like talking about her and giving accounts of like interactions they had and stories of her, which I think is very, very cool. So she would also pay the kids when she was like ill her last year or so to bring her breakfast in bed every morning when she was sick. So I think that's cute.
Very sweet.
Yeah.
Every woman deserves breakfast in bed.
Absolutely.
Everyone deserves breakfast in bed.
So, as we learned from her courtship days, Annie was a huge dog person, and she ended up bringing their hunting dog, which is an English setter named Dave, on stage with her because he was super comfortable around gunshots, like being a hunting dog. And he sat like a good boy while Annie would shoot apples off his head.
Adorable.
Isn't
You
that
couldn't
so
do that,
cute?
Cowpoke. You're too scared.
No, neither of our dogs could do that.
I don't know. I don't know about Squishy.
She moves too much. She'd like get distracted by a bug and
Or
throw
try to
the
eat
apple. Yeah, like.
You don't know that.
So the big things that Annie fought for in her life were getting women the right to employment, equal pay, the ability to participate in sports, and giving them rights to own guns and defend themselves at home and in town.
Fuck yes.
All about that.
All
Yeah.
about it. Every time. Every single one of those things.
Yes. So she shot in all sorts of charity events for orphans, widows, and underprivileged women. And she also donated to the Red Cross and volunteered in military charities.
No.
Yeah. So I think as a whole, Annie Oakley was pretty incredible. I only knew of her as a sharpshooter,
Definitely.
so I think it's yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, you're okay. I was saying I think it's really interesting to hear about her like philanthropic sides and like more of the unknown parts of Annie Oakley that we don't know about.
Definitely.
I agree, and I think it's good to hear about the more civil side that she ended up taking and all these things, because I always heard of Annie Oakley as the wild one, greatest gunslinger, but a woman of power, a woman of independence is. My mama spoke of Annie Oakley a lot when I was growing up, and that was a big thing. Was she was a woman of independence, and that's who my mom always like compared herself to. Was like I always took my own lead on things. I always was able to take care of myself. And you know what? Everything worked out the way I wanted it to, kind of shit. So it grew up as a household name to me, but I did not have this level of like understanding of her. I didn't even get any of this, but it is still like a respected name deep in my heart. So.
Well, it was definitely interesting to find out that, like, because mostly we know her as this, performer, this, almost a sidekick to, I think most of, in most of American culture, she's kind of seen as, second best to Wild Bill, but it's interesting to find out, like, what she actually did, like Nona touched on, like, with her not almost, but her philanthropic work. But I think that's very cool. But what really stood out to me and I thought was pretty badass was her company of sharpshooters that she tried to that she had trained, and tried to
Women.
the
1,500 women.
The 15,000 that she taught how to shoot, and then the 50 that she offered to the president.
She offered. I think that's very cool.
Wild. That's insane.
That was one thing that stood out to me for sure. But
some Robin Hood shit. Like,
yeah,
definitely very.
Get together. All right, let's let those learn kind of how to shoot, how to. Sorry to cut you off. But I'm right there with you on like the education level of it does hit.
Definitely, she wanted to do good for women, and kind of give them that confidence and actually give them a useful skill, especially at the time. So I think that's totally fucking awesome.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And yeah, I liked learning about her a lot. And I was gonna say I always thought she was because I never really knew much about her. Like I'd heard of her, but I never like studied her in school or like she was not a household name in my childhood home. And so I kind of always had an image of her as either like she was an outlaw or she was somebody who fought outlaws, and that's why she was so beloved. And so it was interesting to me to learn that she was just a performer and was not like out there fighting bad guys, because that was the image I had in my head. But it's kind of like interesting because I think she was almost fighting the worst bad guys with her philanthropy and like with her education of women and stuff. Like,
Really well put.
That's really where I wanted to jump into. I'm glad you got that. Is that she fought the worst of bad guys by not. It wasn't just like out there shooting down the ranch hands, shit like that. It wasn't anything like that. It was she was actually fighting stigmas and fucking helping the poor
and fighting the patriarchy and like
she was fighting the bad guy, just in ways that are a lot easier or a lot less easy to represent in old black and white gunslinger movies that we all enjoy.
Absolutely, yeah.
Very true. Well put.
Yeah, I think she lived a pretty amazing life, though.
Oh, yeah, Annie Oakley.
Thank y'all for listening, and have a gunslinging great day.
Thanks for listening. If you guys enjoyed that, tell your friends, or give us a follow on social media. We are Tenacious V's podcast pretty much everywhere. You can listen on Podbean, YouTube, and Spotify, and these episodes are brought to you by Nona, Will, and Johnny, and the music is done by Staple Milk. Come back next time for some more historical heroines.